You're holding your baby, and everything seems fine for 1 second. Then suddenly, their little body goes rigid. Their head tips back, their chest pushes forward, and they arch like a bow in your arms. No loud noise, no obvious pain, no clear reason. Just that sharp, confusing movement that makes so many parents think, what was that? Did I miss something? Is this normal? Or is my baby trying to tell me something I still don't understand? And that's the part that gets under your skin. Because when a baby cries, at least it feels like a familiar signal. But back arching feels different. It feels dramatic. It feels intense. Sometimes it even feels almost emotional, like your baby is protesting something with their whole body. And when it happens again and again, during a diaper change, while being held, right before a fuss, or in what looks like a perfectly calm moment, it can leave parents stuck between two equally uncomfortable thoughts. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it means more than I realize. The truth is, in many cases, babies who arch their backs for no obvious reason are not being random at all. They're communicating, just not in the way adults expect. Because before babies have words, they don't just cry to send a message. They use posture, they use tension, they use stillness, they use movement. And one of the strongest messages they can send is through the shape of their body. So if you've ever looked at your baby arching backward and thought, why does this feel like more than fussiness? You're right to wonder. Because the common explanation is only part of the story. And once you see what this behavior can really mean, you start reading your baby in a completely different way. But first, we need to talk about the explanation most parents hear first, and why it doesn't fully explain what's actually happening.
Usually, when people talk about babies arching their backs, they go straight to physical discomfort. Gas, reflux, colic. Maybe they're overtired. Maybe they're just cranky. And to be fair, sometimes that is part of the picture. A baby who feels uncomfortable in their body may absolutely stiffen, push away, and arch. That explanation isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. Because if back arching were only about pain, it wouldn't show up in so many different emotional moments. It wouldn't happen when a baby is overwhelmed by noise. It wouldn't happen when they want something to stop but can't escape it. It wouldn't happen during transitions, when they're being moved, changed, repositioned, dressed, or handled a little too fast. And it definitely wouldn't show up in those strange moments when a baby seems both upset and alert at the same time. Like their body is saying no before their cry fully catches up. That's what makes this behavior so easy to misread. Adults tend to look for one clean cause, but babies don't always work like that. Their nervous systems are still immature, their tolerance for stimulation is limited, and their communication is whole body communication. So the same movement can come from more than one internal state. A back arch can mean discomfort, yes, but it can also mean overload, frustration, startle, loss of control, a need for space, a need for a pause, a need for help regulating. In other words, the question usually isn't just, what's wrong? The better question is, what is my baby trying to reduce, escape, organize, or say with this movement? And when you ask that question, the behavior stops looking random and starts looking surprisingly logical. Because underneath the arch is often a very specific kind of baby communication. And once you understand that language, the whole picture starts to change.
One of the most important things to understand about babies is that they are constantly giving engagement cues and disengagement cues. Engagement cues say, I'm interested, I'm available, I can handle this right now. Disengagement cues say, this is too much, I need a break, I need something to change. And back arching often falls into that second category. Think about how many smaller signals can come before it. A baby looks away. Their face tightens, their hands clench, their movements get jerky instead of smooth, their breathing changes, their fussing becomes sharper. Then, if the stimulation keeps coming, their body may escalate into a stronger signal. That's where the arch can appear. Not as a mystery move, but as a louder version of, I'm not comfortable with this right now. That's why arching often shows up in moments that seem ordinary to us, but feel intense to a baby. Being passed from one person to another, a bright room after a calm one, a diaper change when the body is exposed, repositioned, and touched all at once, being held in a way that feels too confining when they want to adjust. Even prolonged face-to-face interaction can become too much for a very young baby, which is why babies also look away to protect themselves from overwhelm. What feels minor to us can feel like a flood to them. And here's the deeper part. Babies don't have the mature internal brakes adults have. They can't easily downshift themselves once they cross a threshold. So when their system starts saying, this is too much, the message comes out physically. They don't say, I need a sensory break. They arch, they fuss, they struggle. Their body becomes the sentence. So when your baby arches backward in your arms, it may not be defiance, drama, or bad behavior at all. It may be one of the clearest stress signals they know how to give. But that still leaves a big question. If it's a stress cue, why does it sometimes happen so suddenly? And why does it sometimes look like it comes out of nowhere? That's where the nervous system piece changes everything.
A baby's nervous system is doing an enormous amount of work in the first months of life. Every sound, shift, touch, temperature change, facial expression, and body position has to be processed by a system that is still learning how to organize experience. That means some behaviors that look emotional are also neurological and regulatory. The body is not just expressing a feeling, it is trying to manage one. That matters because babies often arch not only when something is wrong, but when they are struggling to coordinate their internal state. Sometimes they are startled. Sometimes they are overstimulated. Sometimes they are right on the edge between calm and crying. Sometimes they want connection, but the form of connection is too intense in that moment. Sometimes they are physically uncomfortable and emotionally overloaded at the same time. For a baby, those things blur together fast. This is also why context matters more than any single incident. A brief stiffening in a very young baby can happen as part of normal, immature reflexes. A baby might also extend or arch during a buildup of fussing, when they're moving from alert to overwhelmed. And some babies seem to live closer to that threshold than others. They are more sensitive to transitions, more reactive to handling, more easily flooded by noise, light, or fast-paced interaction. Not because they are difficult, but because their system is broadcasting more honestly and more intensely. And this is where parents become incredibly important. Babies are not born able to regulate well on their own. They borrow regulation from us. Your slower hands, softer voice, gentler pacing, and ability to notice early cues can help their system settle before it has to shout. If your baby arches their back often, the goal is not to obsess over every movement. It's to become a pattern reader. Start noticing the setup. Did it happen during too much noise or stimulation? During handling? During a transition? Right before crying? Right after a feed? When they were tired but not fully asleep? The arch itself is important, but the sequence around it is usually even more revealing. In the moment, the best response is often simpler than parents expect. Pause. Reduce input. Slow your movements. Reposition gently. Offer a calmer hold instead of more active bouncing. If your baby is looking away, let them look away. If their body is tense, think containment and support rather than extra stimulation. Sometimes just dimming the environment, changing the angle you're holding them, or giving them a second to reset can make the whole interaction feel different. You're not fixing the arch, you're responding to the message underneath it. What helps most is learning your baby's early warning signs so the body doesn't need to escalate. For one baby, the cue may be sudden stillness. For another, it's frantic kicking. For another, it's facial tension, finger splaying, or turning the head away. Back arching is often not the first cue. It's the stronger cue that shows up when the earlier ones were missed,
or when the baby simply couldn't hold it together anymore. There is one careful caution here, and it matters. If back arching is frequent, intense, clearly painful, or consistently shows up with other concerning signs, like repeated vomiting, feeding distress, fever, trouble breathing, unusual stiffness, abnormal eye movements, reduced responsiveness, or a sudden change in your baby's normal behavior, it's worth checking in with your pediatrician. Not because arching automatically means something is wrong, but because pattern and context always matter. Parents don't need to panic, but they also don't need to ignore their instincts. And that balance is the key.
So the next time your baby arches backward and your first thought is, why are they doing this for no reason? Remember this. There usually is a reason. It just may not be obvious in adult terms. The reason may be, this is too much. The reason may be, I'm uncomfortable. The reason may be, slow down. The reason may be, I can't organize what I'm feeling right now, and this is the only way I know how to show you. That reframe is powerful because it turns a frightening or frustrating moment into a readable one. Your baby is not trying to confuse you. They are not being dramatic. They are not already difficult. They are doing something much more vulnerable than that. They are revealing their threshold in real time. And once parents start seeing arching as communication instead of chaos, the whole relationship softens. You stop fighting the moment and start listening to it. And the beautiful part is that babies usually don't need perfect interpretation. They need responsive interpretation. Close enough, gentle enough, curious enough. When you pause, observe, and respond with calm instead of panic, your baby is already learning something important. When my body gets overwhelmed, someone helps me feel safe again. That is the beginning of understanding. That is the beginning of trust. And for a baby, that matters more than getting every cue exactly right. So if this helped you see your baby differently, stay with that instinct. Because the tiny signals most parents miss usually come before the big ones. And one of the most overlooked signals of all is what happens just before a baby arches back. The head turn, the stare away, the sudden break in eye contact that quietly says, I need a pause. That next layer changes everything. And once you notice it, you can often catch the overwhelm before the body has to shout.